our next speaker hails from Birmingham. Her name is Caitlin Connors, and she, for the last 10 years, has been working as a political director for the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. And she works closely with Eric Johnston, who you have seen at these conferences all the time, heading the Alabama Pro-Life Coalition. And she does amazing work. And she's going to tell us a little bit about the abortion pill. I know we talked about that last year, so some of you may remember and have some background, but she's going to tell us about this abortion pill and what it does and then what we can do to stop it.
And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, first, wanted to just give an overview of what we mean when we're saying abortion drugs, what it is, the complications we see from that, give you a little background on the timeline of how the abortion drug became more and more prevalent in our society and where we are today.
And that handout is in there.
Yes.
The timeline handout is in the.
Perfect. Yes, so you'll have a timeline handout. Thank you, Becky, for printing that out. And it goes into a lot of detail that I won't go into today, but you can refer to that in terms of where we got started with the abortion drug and where we are today. And then finally, wanted to talk about what we can do and what is being done on this issue. So grateful to speak to y'all today, and thank you for everything that everybody in this room does on the life issue. So what are abortion drugs? I like to just give this quick overview because oftentimes in the media you will see it used interchangeably as birth control or even emergency contraception. That's not what we're talking about. The abortion drug is in fact a 2-pill regimen that is taken once a pregnancy is known and the intention is to terminate that pregnancy. So we are not talking about any form of contraception. This is for a known pregnancy. Typically speaking, the abortion drug is taken through the first trimester of pregnancy, although we'll get into in just a little bit where we are right now has given us this sort of free-for-all situation, which unfortunately we exist in. So a pregnant woman taking the abortion pill, there is a 2-pill regimen. The first pill she would take, you may have heard the pharmaceutical names of mifepristone, misoprostol. That's what we're talking about. The first pill that a woman takes essentially blocks the progesterone hormone. That's also known as the pregnancy hormone. That's what sustains the pregnancy. That's what gives nutrition to the baby. That first pill blocks that hormone, so essentially starves the unborn baby. The second pill is intended to induce labor, and so her uterus will contract and expel the unborn child. That is the regimen, and I apologize to speak about that so matter-of-factly, but that is what we are dealing with when we talk about the abortion drug. It is by far the most common way of abortion today. I think a lot of us still think of abortions happening at brick and mortar clinics, Planned Parenthood clinics, and while that certainly does still happen, unfortunately, over 60%, and depending on the state, upwards of 70% of abortions that happen in our country are done via abortion pill. The complication rates, as you might imagine, are incredible. So women who take these pills oftentimes can suffer from hemorrhaging, from infection, from unfortunately the remaining tissue in her uterus not being fully dispelled. And with no medical oversight and guidance, she might often find herself in her own home hemorrhaging and not knowing what to do. So if you think about a girl or a woman who is facing an unplanned pregnancy, it's already a very terrifying time that she's going through. If she's seeking abortion pills online and they're being mailed to her, for example, and we'll get into that a little bit more as well, taking these pills and then having adverse complications, and she's had no medical oversight, nobody's been talking to her about what might happen, we can only imagine all the ways in which this can go wrong. So we have a major problem on our hands. We may think that here in Alabama we have very strong pro-life laws, and we do, and we're very grateful for our lawmakers here who have fought for that. The reality is, though, where we are today means that mail order abortion is very much happening, and it's happening right now. So to go into a little bit of a timeline of how we got here. Going back to the year 2000, at the end of Clinton's term, is when the abortion drug was initially brought to market. When it was initially brought to market, it was not as extensively studied as other drugs are when they are brought to market. So every pill that gets brought for consumer use is to go under many studies, different testing groups, things like that. The abortion pill was rushed through the process because there's always been a political agenda behind abortion. So from the very beginning, the pill wasn't accurately studied. It became available in the year 2000, but it had restrictions around it. It had some common sense, okay, we know, a doctor should be involved at a minimum here. Fast forward in the Obama administration, of course, relaxed some of those risk protocols, again, in the name of expanded abortion. Fast forward a little bit further, we get into the Biden administration. And that is where we really are faced with our current day dilemma. And that is in the name of COVID, when none of us were supposed to leave our house and we were supposed to be locked down forever and social distancing. What a convenient way to say, oh, well, actually, you don't need an in-person medical exam to get your abortion drugs anymore. You can do that via telemedicine, or even now we just have websites where you can get on and you can say who you are, but how are we really verifying that? It was a clever way to completely expand abortion. And so now here we are in this horrific situation of abortion drugs becoming more and more prevalent and being able to be shipped to any individual's home across this country. Unfortunately, here in Alabama, we're not protected from that. While we do have a law that explicitly says you shall not mail these drugs into the state of Alabama, we are still dealing with the fact that we have states across the country, in New York and California, some others, who have shield laws. A shield law is basically their way of getting around other states' laws. So there are doctors in New York, for example, who know that in Alabama it's illegal to mail in the abortion drugs. But in New York, it's not illegal, and they have a shield law that protects them from breaking our law. Now, if that sounds crazy, that's because it is, and this is a fundamental constitutional issue that we're having to face. It is going through the court system now, and I think ultimately the Supreme Court is going to have to take this up because we just can't maintain a system where some states' laws essentially become more important than another state's law. But that is where we are right now, and that is how so many of these abortion drugs are being mailed in to our state and other pro-life states across the country. So we find ourselves in this situation. Unfortunately, we are in a position now under a Trump administration where we could at least, at a minimum, get those risk protocols back in place, because we're still operating under a Biden administration policy with the lack of oversight and the medical oversight. So we are certainly pushing the administration and the FDA to do, at a minimum, put these safety protocols back in place. We don't want to see these drugs on the shelves at all. We'll be honest. I don't think anybody in this room wants to see that either. But at a minimum, what are we doing? For an industry that gets to say that they are for women's health and have been able to get away with that lie for all of their existence, how can they say that shipping these pills anonymously with no medical oversight to vulnerable women is in any way for their health care? And what we all know in this room is that abortion has always been a bottom line for Planned Parenthood in the abortion industry, and this is just the new frontier for them. So we find ourselves in this position. We want to, obviously, like I said, we want to take these pills off the shelves. We want to see an America where there is no abortion. We're taking steps to get there. And like I said, we have a lot of pro-life states across the country, Alabama included, which has done their best to pass laws to protect our citizens. But we have these blue states across the country who are not following our laws. So we need Washington to act. We need FDA oversight. We need the administration to put these regulations back in place. And then what can we do at the state level? There has been, as I said, legislation before. Last session, there was a bill filed by Representative Keel, and I believe it will be filed again this year. And it really demands us to take a clever approach when it comes to the abortion drug, because we have an industry who works tirelessly to make sure they can continue to expand abortion. So We have the bill last year when it was filed, it was HB 611. We'll see what the number is. It hasn't been pre-filed yet. And this is essentially looking at internet providers. So when you think of some of the other industries, when we think of sports betting, or we think of even in some states, the shipping, purchasing and shipping of alcohol is not legal in some states, or pornography, being able to have to be a certain age. Now, I know people can get around these things. People can be clever. But at a minimum, can we create a deterrence from internet providers to say, okay, this state explicitly says that these pills shall not be mailed into the state. So as an internet provider, I have a responsibility to block this website with this certain URL coming from this state, to be able to ship those pills. So this is some legislation. We have to be clever on our end, just like they're clever on their end. And so we are looking at that bill. I think it's a good bill. I think it's an opportunity for us to, at a minimum, like I said, create this deterrence, because violators of that would be liable for either a Class A or Class C felony if they violate this law. So we know that the abortion industry gets away with breaking laws, and they actively talk about it, brag about it, but what can we do at the state level to try to keep that from happening? So this is one piece of legislation that we're excited about, that we think can actually start addressing that problem, and has a little bit of precedent, like I said, with some other industries where we've been able to see illegal activity in our state be blocked or at least mitigated due to the internet provider being willing to share it. Now, I do want to paint a picture for y'all, because right now, I could get on my phone. I know of a few websites off the top of my head. There are a few more, and then there are several that are kind of these fly-by-night. As soon as they're discovered, they might take them offline. But I could get on, let's say, Plan C is one of the most prevalent ones. I could get on that website. I could tell them where I live. I could say what my name is. I could say how old I am. I could say how far along in the pregnancy I think I am. I'm not talking to a doctor. I'm filling out an online form, essentially anonymously. And they will tell me how I can acquire the pills. They'll send me to a different distributor maybe. They'll even tell me, well, in your state, it's the abortion is severely limited or restricted, but here's how you can still get the pills. We have seen cases where Aid Access and other organizations like that buy up billboard space in our pro-life states. They advertise directly on college campuses saying, hey, do you need an abortion? Here's how we can help you. Knowing that what they're advertising for to provide is against our law. But they have these protections via shield laws. And honestly, in a lot of cases, some, because of the abortion industry being as litigious as they are, there is fear of going after them. So we have mounting evidence of the abortion industry intending to break laws and really targeting our most vulnerable people. If you can also imagine the situation, we have now uncovered an entirely new form of domestic violence. So another resource that I have available to y'all, and by the way, I have so many things on this issue because we could talk about so many different specifics when it comes to the issue of abortion drugs. So if there's anything more specific I can get, Becky, I'm happy to provide that. But something else, so uncovering this whole new level of domestic violence. So we've seen case after case now of whether it be an ex-husband, a disgruntled boyfriend who find their girlfriend, their wife, their mistress is expecting, have ordered these pills online themselves. They can pretend to be whoever they want, and they have laced drinks with them to the woman who is unaware that this is happening and also unwilling to abort the baby. And in some cases, that baby has died. In some cases, the woman has had adverse effects. So just think of the possibilities that we face. Think of the issues that we have with human trafficking. Like, why are we making their job and the horrible things that they do even easier to access these pills online and to force women to have forced abortions? We can only imagine all of the different horrific scenarios at place when we allow for abortion drugs to be sent in the mail. Now, if this was any other kind of drug, everybody in this room knows that this would not be tolerated. This wouldn't be acceptable. We would have had many studies on this. We would have made sure that there are safeguards in place, that women are being protected. But because this is abortion, this is, to the abortion industry, a sacred thing. And they will do whatever they have to do to protect it. And so we have to, as a pro-life movement, we've been obviously working for years and years and years. The overturning of Roe versus Wade was an incredible moment, and we'll always forever be thankful of that. But the reality we face today is that there are actually more abortions happening now than there were pre-Roe. And that is because of these abortion drugs. Because you can access them online, because you can have them mailed to your door, because we have other states who actively promote abortion tourism. So if abortion's not legal in your state, here we have a slush fund over here to help pay for your travel expenses to get you up to New York or get you over to California. It's hard for us to even wrap our minds around the lengths that they're willing to go to make sure abortion is a top priority and as prevalent as possible. So it is daunting. It is a major issue, and it's something that we're working on from a legislative perspective, from an administrative perspective, but it also has to be something that we are thinking about spiritually. This is a spiritual war as well, and I think I can speak freely in this room, knowing that all of y'all are prayer warriors as well. So I would ask, when we're talking about this issue, to think of these women who are directly vulnerable, who are in harm's way when it comes to this, who in many cases have had their own home be turned into an abortion clinic, and have had to face with the reality of a non-supervised, in some cases coerced or forced abortion on them. And knowing that there's an industry who continues to seek ways to expand that. So we are really looking forward to the legislation this session to go after specifically the internet providers trying to set certain standards that other industries have in place when we have specific laws on our books to protect our citizens from certain industries. And so I'm happy to talk more about that. I know I've got a little over 5 minutes. We can do questions. And like I said, we have so many resources on this. It was truly hard for me to choose, what should we talk about specifically? From a political perspective, there's much to say, again, from the legislative perspective, policy perspective. So I'm happy to answer questions and get any more additional resources to y'all that I can. I do think one complicating factor, and something I can't remember if I mentioned, the lack of reporting that we have on abortion drugs is really incredible in a bad way. So there's so much. So we have the numbers that we have. We know of certain complication rates. We know of certain usages of the abortion pill, but we only have a small picture. The picture we have is bad enough. But we know the number is much larger because we have some states like California, for example, who don't even have reporting requirements. So when it comes to really having a clear picture of the prevalence of the issue, that is one complicating factor. Another is that we've had plenty, again, blue states pass laws that have now don't require either the distributor, or if it came from a medical office, to put their name and return address on these abortion drugs. So truly, sometimes they're being sent completely anonymously and can't be traced back. And then thirdly, although we do have a lot of state-based violators of this, a good bit of it also happens in foreign nations. So India, China, the Netherlands is another hotbed country for this activity. And then we have extradition issues there in terms of how we can go about prosecuting foreign entities. But to your point, I do think we have to think very creatively. We know that this is not just an abortion issue. This this really is a women's health issue. This really is a domestic violence issue. This really is a human trafficking issue. So I think we have an opportunity to bring in and kind of build a coalition that hasn't really been together necessarily on this issue, because now it's kind of an all of the above in terms of who's affected. So appreciate that.
I realize I'm asking you to speculate a little bit here, but what do you think is the possibility of getting abortions, whether a lady chooses to get an abortion or a pill is given to her surreptitiously, classified as a capital crime?
A capital crime. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I will have to speculate on that a little bit. We do have some state, Alabama, we have where if a pregnant woman is murdered, for example, that's considered 2 murders, right? So there is some precedent in terms of acknowledging that unborn life as truly another human being, as they are. So I think maybe there's a window to navigate through that and some of the precedent that we've set there. I really do think also it's a matter of I know everybody in this room is on board, but getting our nation to even acknowledge what it is we're dealing with here. There is such a disconnect between understanding what we're talking about when we talk about the abortion pill, what we're talking about when we talk about abortion generally. There is the Planned Parenthood and abortion industry has gotten away for so long with being able to equate themselves with women's health. And unfortunately, that's really permeated our culture. Roe versus Wade was the law of the land for 50 years. We've had 3 years since Roe has been overturned. I think we have a cultural war that we have to fight, and it took 50 years for this to be part of part of the culture, and it's going to take at least a few years to get people back on track.
So my question, it kind of ties in with the previous speaker was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
What are your opinions on post-fertilization contraception, like the morning after pill? Isn't that technically abortion?
Okay, so the morning after pill is, now I'm not a doctor, but the morning after pill is emergency contraception. It's supposed to be taken, I believe, within 72 hours of unprotected sex. And its intention is to prevent a pregnancy. Although, to your point, fertilization could have occurred in that time. And so in that way, some people would classify it as an abortifacient. Catholics in the room, I know that we do. But in terms of like pro-life policy, that is not currently what it is we're trying to fight against, because right now we have an abortion drug where people are taking and actively terminating, babies who are 12 weeks old and older. But understand your point, and yes, it could be classified as an abortifacient because of that fertilization window, and really we wouldn't know for sure, right? But it's possible.
Last parting words.
No, like I said, I have plenty of resources on this. I appreciate the time. I know it's a heavy subject, and there's a lot of work that we have to do. We've had a lot of victories in the pro-life movement, but as Becky knows and everybody in this room, we have so much work to do. So I'm grateful for y'all's time, and thank you for everything you do. Thank you, Becky. Appreciate it.